Explosives Ordnance Disposal. Specialist Amanda Torres had been attached to SEAL Team 7 for 6 months, but she'd never seen them hesitate like this. The kill zone stretched 200 meters ahead, an open field littered with IEDs, anti-personnel mines, and booby traps that had already claimed 3 vehicles and a reconnaissance team. "Torres, we need alternate routes," Lieutenant Commander Wilson ordered, studying the tactical display. "That field is a death trap." Amanda looked through her binoculars at the scattered metal fragments that marked where mines had detonated, then at the village beyond, where civilians were trapped by enemy forces. The SEALs were right. Crossing that kill zone was suicide. But sometimes suicide was the only way to save lives. The Afghan morning sun cast long shadows across the Helmand Province Valley as SEAL Team 7 established their overwatch position on the rocky ridge overlooking what intelligence reports had designated as Target Area Bravo. The valley floor, once used for farming, had been transformed over the past 3 months into a carefully engineered killing ground that represented the evolution of Taliban defensive tactics. Staff Sergeant Amanda Torres adjusted her position behind the spotting scope, methodically studying terrain that had become her professional obsession over the past 24 hours. 3 days earlier, a convoy carrying international aid workers had been ambushed while traveling through this valley. The survivors, 4 doctors and 2 nurses from Doctors Without Borders, were now being held in the fortified compound of Kala-i-Nal, visible as a cluster of mud brick buildings 200 meters across the minefield. The rescue mission should have been straightforward for SEAL Team 7. Intelligence indicated moderate enemy resistance, a known target location, and civilian hostages whose rescue would justify the operational risk. What complicated everything was the minefield that separated the rescue force from their objective, a defensive obstacle that had already demonstrated its lethality by destroying 3 vehicles and killing 8 members of an Afghan National Army reconnaissance patrol. The intelligence briefing had revealed disturbing details about the minefield's construction. Unlike previous Taliban obstacles that relied on scavenged materials and crude construction techniques, this defensive system incorporated military-grade explosive devices, sophisticated triggering mechanisms, and engineering principles that reflected formal training and extensive operational experience. Surveillance drone footage had captured images of the construction process over several weeks, showing Taliban engineers working with precision instruments, conducting test detonations to verify blast patterns, and employing camouflage techniques that made device detection extremely difficult, even with advanced sensors. "Torres, what's your professional assessment of that obstacle?" Lieutenant Commander David Wilson asked, settling beside her with tactical maps spread across the rocky ground. Amanda had been working with Special Operations Forces for 18 months, following 4 deployments with conventional units where her role had been limited to clearing roads and structures after combat units had secured areas. Assignment to SEAL Team 7 had introduced her to a different kind of warfare. Operations in contested terrain where explosive ordnance disposal specialists worked under enemy fire with incomplete information about threats designed specifically to kill people with her training. Her background included specialized training at the Navy EOD School, the Army's Explosive Ordnance Disposal Center, and classified courses that taught advanced techniques for dealing with sophisticated improvised explosive devices. But textbook knowledge had proven insufficient for the creative intelligence of insurgent bomb makers who combined formal engineering education with practical experience gained through years of asymmetric warfare. "Sir, it's the most sophisticated minefield I've encountered," Amanda replied, continuing her systematic examination through high-powered optics. "They've integrated multiple threat types, pressure-activated mines, command-detonated IEDs, and booby traps, in patterns that create overlapping kill zones throughout the approach." The minefield represented everything Amanda had learned to fear about insurgent engineering capabilities. Early in her career, improvised explosive devices had been crude weapons constructed from readily available materials by bomb makers with limited technical expertise. But years of conflict had produced a generation of Taliban engineers who combined formal military training with practical experience gained through 2 decades of asymmetric warfare. Wilson studied the terrain through his own binoculars, noting the subtle indicators that marked areas where explosive devices had been buried, disturbed earth patterns that didn't match natural erosion, unnatural spacing in the sparse vegetation that grew across the valley floor, small mounds that concealed anti-personnel mines designed to maim rather than kill outright. The tactical complexity of the obstacle was evident in how it exploited natural terrain features to maximize lethality. The minefield used depressions in the ground to hide explosive devices from visual detection while funneling potential attackers into predetermined kill zones. Rocky outcroppings that might provide cover actually concealed observation positions from which Taliban spotters could trigger command-detonated devices. "Explain their tactical concept," Wilson said. Amanda had spent years learning to think like insurgent bomb makers, understanding not just how explosive devices worked, but why they were placed in specific locations and how they were intended to affect both immediate targets and broader mission objectives. "Sir, they've created a psychological trap as much as a physical obstacle," she began. "The field is designed to channel any rescue attempt into predetermined kill zones while simultaneously destroying the morale of forces attempting the crossing. The psychological aspect of the obstacle was as important as its physical lethality. Taliban engineers understood that the most effective defensive measures were those that prevented attacks entirely rather than simply destroying attackers. A minefield that appeared impossible to cross might deter rescue operations completely, achieving strategic objectives without expending ammunition or risking personnel in direct combat. They know American tactical doctrine emphasizes speed and precision in hostage rescue operations," Amanda continued. "The minefield forces us to choose between accepting massive casualties during a conventional breach or abandoning the hostages while attempting to develop alternative approaches that may not exist." Wilson checked his watch against the intelligence timeline that governed their operational window. The hostages had been captured 72 hours earlier. Intelligence sources indicated they would be executed at sunset if rescue operations weren't completed, giving SEAL Team 7 approximately 6 hours to solve a problem that conventional military engineering would require days to address properly. The time constraint wasn't arbitrary. Intelligence intercepts had revealed that Taliban leadership was using the hostage situation as a propaganda opportunity, planning to broadcast the executions as demonstration of their ability to defeat American rescue operations. The psychological impact of such a broadcast would extend far beyond the immediate tragedy, potentially influencing Taliban recruitment and American public support for military operations. "How long would standard clearance procedures take?" Wilson asked. Amanda calculated the time required to systematically identify and neutralize each explosive device using established EOD protocols. The mathematics were discouraging. "Sir, conventional clearance of a single lane through this field would require 12 to 16 hours under optimal conditions," she said. "That assumes no enemy interference, perfect weather, and specialized equipment we don't have available." The timeline made conventional approaches impossible. Even if sufficient time were available, systematic clearance would require heavy engineering equipment, additional EOD personnel, and explosive ordnance disposal procedures that would announce American intentions to every enemy observer in the region. Standard minefield clearance involved methodical procedures designed to ensure maximum safety for clearance personnel. Each suspected device location had to be approached carefully, identified positively, and neutralized using techniques that minimized risk to the EOD specialist. The process was slow, deliberate, and completely unsuitable for time-critical hostage rescue operations. Amanda had joined the military 6 years earlier, after completing an engineering degree at the University of Texas. She had chosen explosive ordnance disposal as her specialty because it combined her technical background with direct contribution to soldier safety and mission success. Her first deployment had taught her that modern combat bore little resemblance to the controlled training environments where she had learned basic EOD procedures. Real combat required explosive ordnance disposal specialists to work in contested areas, under time pressure, with incomplete information about threats that had been specifically designed by intelligent and creative adversaries. Each deployment had added to her understanding of insurgent tactics and her ability to solve EOD problems that defeated specialists who relied solely on technical training and standard procedures. Her reputation within the special operations community had been built on successful resolution of explosive ordnance problems that had stumped other specialists. She had developed intuitive understanding of how insurgent bomb makers approach their craft, allowing her to recognize patterns and predict device placement with accuracy that sometimes seemed supernatural to colleagues who didn't understand the analytical framework she employed. "Sir, there might be an unconventional solution to this problem," Amanda said, studying the minefield through analytical frameworks she had developed through years of experience with insurgent engineering. "Explain." "The field is designed based on assumptions about how American forces will approach the problem of crossing defended terrain. Those assumptions create predictable patterns in how threats are distributed, and patterns can be analyzed and potentially exploited." Wilson had enough combat experience to recognize that desperate situations sometimes required innovative solutions, but he also understood that unconventional approaches carried risks that could result in catastrophic failure when applied incorrectly. "Torres, I need specifics. What kind of unconventional solution are you proposing?" Amanda pointed to areas of the minefield that appeared most heavily defended. "Sir, they've concentrated their most lethal devices along routes that provide tactical advantages to attacking forces, areas with natural cover, good fields of observation, and logical approach lanes." "Standard defensive engineering." "Yes, sir. But they've also created areas that appear extremely dangerous specifically to discourage approach through routes that might actually be safer than the obvious alternatives." Wilson studied the terrain again, trying to understand the counterintuitive logic Amanda was describing. Military training emphasized using terrain features that provided protection and tactical advantage when advancing toward objectives, not deliberately choosing routes that appeared to maximize exposure to enemy fire. The concept challenged fundamental assumptions about tactical movement that had been drilled into every member of SEAL Team 7 through years of training and operational experience. American military doctrine was built on principles of using terrain to advantage, minimizing exposure to enemy fire, and maintaining tactical initiative through superior positioning and movement techniques. "You're suggesting that the most dangerous-looking areas might actually contain fewer threats?" "Sir, I'm suggesting that insurgent bomb makers face the same logistical constraints that limit all military engineering. They can't place unlimited numbers of explosive devices across every square meter of a 200-meter field. They have to make choices about where to position their most effective weapons." Amanda's analysis was based on her understanding of the practical limitations that governed insurgent engineering capabilities. Even sophisticated bomb makers worked within constraints of available materials, construction time, and technical expertise. These limitations created patterns in how defensive obstacles were constructed, and patterns could be recognized by someone with sufficient experience and analytical capability. "Torres, are you volunteering to test this theory by leading a crossing of that minefield?" Amanda looked at the obstacle, then at the village beyond, where innocent people were facing execution, because a group of elite warriors had encountered a tactical problem they couldn't solve using conventional methods. The decision represented the convergence of everything she had learned during 6 years of explosive ordnance disposal training and 4 combat deployments in some of the world's most dangerous environments. The weight of the decision extended beyond personal risk. If she was wrong about her analysis, she would die within the first few steps of her crossing attempt. If she was correct but made execution errors, the result would be the same. If she succeeded in crossing but her route couldn't be followed safely by the SEAL team, the hostages would still die, and her sacrifice would be meaningless. But Amanda understood that some situations could only be resolved by someone willing to accept risks that appeared unreasonable to people who didn't possess the specialized knowledge necessary to recognize when apparent suicide might actually represent the safest available option. "Sir, I'm volunteering to prove that sometimes the most dangerous path is actually the safest available option." Wilson assembled SEAL Team 7 for a tactical briefing that would determine whether Amanda's unconventional analysis could be translated into a workable plan for crossing terrain that conventional military doctrine considered impassable. Chief Petty Officer Michael Rodriguez, the team's senior enlisted leader, examined Amanda's proposed route with skepticism earned through 20 years of special operations experience in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. "Torres, you're talking about walking across a minefield that was specifically designed to kill American Special Operations Forces," Rodriguez said. "That's the definition of suicide." "Chief, I'm talking about crossing it using knowledge of how these devices were placed and why certain areas were left less heavily defended than others." Petty Officer First Class James Martinez, the team's point man, studied the terrain through high-powered optics. His experience with urban warfare and close-quarters combat in multiple theaters had taught him to recognize patterns in how insurgent forces approached the problem of killing American soldiers. "Ma'am, this field looks like someone took 20 years of lessons learned about fighting Americans and created the ultimate trap." "That's exactly why the approach might work," Amanda replied. "Ultimate traps follow ultimate patterns. Once you understand the pattern, you can identify the exceptions." Petty Officer Second Class David Chen, the team's intelligence specialist, had been monitoring enemy communications and analyzing signals intelligence throughout their reconnaissance of the target area. "Ma'am, intercepts indicate Taliban forces have established multiple observation positions watching this field," Chen reported. "Even if you identify a safe route, they'll be able to observe your movement and potentially trigger command-detonated devices." Amanda had considered this threat during her analysis of the minefield's defensive systems. Command-detonated explosives represented one of the most dangerous challenges facing forces attempting to cross defended terrain. But they also created vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone who understood the psychological and technical constraints governing their employment. "Chen, that's actually a potential advantage," Amanda said. "Command-detonated devices are most effective when controllers can predict target movement. If we move through areas they don't expect us to use, their ability to employ those weapons effectively is significantly reduced." The tactical discussion continued as Amanda explained her analysis of the minefield's construction and the assumptions that had guided its design. She described how Taliban engineers had created a killing ground based on their understanding of American tactical doctrine, but had also created exploitable patterns through the very sophistication that made the obstacle appear impenetrable. Her analysis incorporated intelligence about the specific insurgent unit responsible for the minefield's construction. The engineering team had previously created similar obstacles in other regions, allowing Amanda to understand not just the technical aspects of their work, but the tactical preferences and psychological patterns that characterized their approach to defensive engineering. Petty Officer Second Class Thomas Anderson, the team's medic, had worked with Amanda on previous missions and understood her analytical capabilities and unconventional problem-solving methods. "Amanda, I've seen you solve EOD problems that defeated other specialists," Anderson said. "But this isn't just about individual devices. This is about crossing 200 meters where every step could trigger instant death." "Tom, that's exactly what makes it possible," Amanda replied. "They can't make every step lethal because they don't have unlimited resources. Resource constraints create patterns, and patterns can be exploited." Wilson made the decision that would either validate Amanda's expertise or result in casualties that would end his career and her life. "Torres, you have authorization to attempt reconnaissance of your proposed route. If you can confirm safe passage, we'll follow your path." Amanda conducted final equipment checks, selecting tools and protective gear based on her analysis of threats she would encounter during the crossing. Her equipment load represented careful balance between protection and mobility, understanding that survival would depend more on avoiding detection than surviving it. She chose minimal electronic equipment, relying primarily on visual recognition of explosive device indicators, rather than metal detectors that might broadcast her location to enemy forces monitoring radio frequencies. Her primary tools were trained observation skills and understanding of insurgent engineering practices developed through years of experience. Amanda approached the minefield edge with methodical precision that had characterized her 6 years of EOD experience. Each step was calculated based on analysis of terrain features, vegetation patterns, and subtle indicators, revealing where explosive devices had been buried. Her movement technique combined conventional mine detection procedures with intuitive analysis of how insurgent bomb makers approached the problem of killing American soldiers. She identified pressure plates by studying vegetation disturbance during device emplacement. She located command-detonated explosives by tracing wire patterns connecting buried charges to concealed firing positions. The first 75 meters confirmed her analysis. Areas appearing most dangerous, open ground offering no tactical advantages, contained fewer explosive devices because Taliban engineers assumed no trained personnel would approach through terrain providing no protection. Amanda navigated using understanding that the obstacles designers had created a tactical puzzle based on assumptions about how enemies would behave when confronted with apparently insurmountable challenges. At the crossing's midpoint, Amanda encountered the most sophisticated explosive device cluster she had ever seen. Anti-personnel mines arranged in patterns that would funnel anyone detecting the first devices directly into kill radius of secondary charges, positioned to exploit evasive maneuvers that conventional EOD procedures would dictate. The configuration represented culmination of insurgent learning about defeating American military capabilities. It specifically targeted training, equipment, and tactical procedures that EOD specialists used when navigating dangerous terrain. But Amanda had spent years learning how such sophisticated traps could be defeated. She identified the narrow corridor existing between overlapping blast zones, marked it for the SEAL team, and continued her advance toward the objective. As Amanda approached the final section, she encountered the ultimate deception Taliban engineers had incorporated into their design. What appeared to be clear passage, an obvious route seeming to offer safety after successfully navigating most of the obstacle, was actually the most densely mined area of the entire field. This final trap was designed to kill anyone who had successfully crossed most of the minefield and might believe they had solved the tactical puzzle. It exploited the psychological tendency of people under extreme stress to assume identified patterns would continue when the most dangerous portion had been saved for last. Amanda navigated around the deception using terrain features, providing concealment from enemy observers while avoiding kill zones established to destroy anyone successfully crossing the majority of the field. "Torres to Team 7, she radioed after 90 minutes of careful movement. "I have reached the objective side. Route is marked and confirmed safe." Within 25 minutes, SEAL Team 7 had crossed the minefield using Amanda's markers. Not a single explosive device detonated. No team members were injured. The hostage rescue operation was executed with textbook precision. All 6 civilian aid workers were recovered safely. Taliban forces were neutralized with no American casualties. The mission's success depended entirely on Amanda's willingness to take the first step into terrain conventional analysis had declared impassable. 2 days later, Lieutenant Commander Wilson submitted recommendations for Amanda to receive the Bronze Star with Valor for actions enabling successful completion of the critical rescue mission. "Torres, what you accomplished was either brilliant tactical innovation or the luckiest decision in military history," Chief Rodriguez said during their return flight. "Chief, preparation meeting opportunity creates what people call luck," Amanda replied. 3 weeks later, Amanda received orders to report to the Joint IED Defeat Organization at Fort Belvoir, where she would develop training programs based on her analysis of advanced insurgent minefield tactics. Her techniques for identifying safe routes through apparently impassable terrain would be incorporated into EOD curricula and special operations doctrine throughout the military. Methods she developed would prepare specialists for operations where conventional clearance procedures were inadequate. Amanda's approach, known as the Torres method among EOD specialists, required understanding not just technical aspects of explosive devices, but psychological and tactical thinking guiding their employment by insurgent forces. The method emphasized analyzing human motivations behind obstacle construction rather than relying solely on technical procedures and electronic equipment. It demanded psychological insight, combined with technical expertise, analytical thinking balanced with personal courage. Years later, Amanda received reports from EOD specialists who had used the Torres method to save lives in conflicts worldwide. Each successful application validated her belief that understanding enemy psychology was as important as explosive engineering for protecting American forces. The Helmand Province minefield became a case study in how individual expertise could solve tactical problems defeating elite units when conventional approaches proved inadequate. Amanda understood her success depended not just on technical knowledge, but willingness to take the first step when everyone else recognized it as potentially suicidal. Some problems could only be solved by people willing to do what appeared impossible. Sometimes, salvation required understanding that the path through hell was shorter than the path around it. Amanda Torres had taken the first step into a kill zone and shown others how to follow safely. That step would echo through military training for decades, teaching future EOD specialists that sometimes the most dangerous path was actually the way home. Her legacy would be measured not in awards, but in lives saved by specialists who learned to think like enemies and find safe passage through landscapes designed to kill them. The Bronze Star represented more than individual courage. It proved that expertise, properly applied with precision and courage, could overcome obstacles. Conventional wisdom declared insurmountable. Some warriors charged through barriers, others walked through carefully, understanding that knowledge and patience could defeat sophisticated engineering and psychology. The kill zone that stopped SEAL Team 7 became testament to individual expertise, applied when conventional solutions proved inadequate and unconventional thinking provided the only path to success. Her methods would be studied and refined by military analysts, incorporated into training programs that prepared future generations of EOD specialists for challenges that hadn't been anticipated by traditional military doctrine. The minefield crossing would be remembered as a turning point in how American forces approached the problem of operating in terrain defended by sophisticated explosive obstacles, proving that individual expertise could overcome seemingly impossible challenges when applied with courage and precision. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this one.